Look, I mean, I can tell you, I was openly told things like, you're going to die poor because, you know, you don't want to, you don't want a tender. There was a time when DA leaders would call me, you know, I work very closely with opposition parties in the legislature on issues of principle and economic and social relevance. And so they would tell me confidentially things that are being said about me in Parliament, in the National Assembly, in their corridors when they're talking leader to leader, to say, no, don't discuss anything with that one. She has no power. She has no influence. She's just an ungovernable, reckless, out of control woman.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Solim Weng at WorldView. Welcome. This is the station where we explore everyone's perspective on things that can broaden our own worldview. From time to time, we have all very interesting people coming here to share with us our perspectives. Today, we have Mandisa Mashego. Many of you in South Africa know her because she used to be a very prominent leader of the economic freedom fighters in Johannesburg. She was the leader in the Gauteng Provincial Legislature, and she's since left the party. She's doing other things, which I'm sure she'll be very happy to discuss with us. But also have you about South Africa. What's going on? Is she afraid, like many of us are? Is she safe? Is she hopeful? Has she got plans to get again, her hands steady into politics again? Mandisa will tell us all that. Mandisa, welcome.
Hi, Solly. Thanks for inviting me to your platform. I'm really, really excited to be here because I kept seeing many exciting people. I'm like, oh, when am I getting an invite?
I'm the really excited
that I am.
No, I'm really excited. You see, we tried before and then HCOM got into the way, but we're not going to let even HCOM, make this impossible. So I'm very happy that we can do this. So Mandisa, the last time we started talking and then all of that stuff happened, the usual load shedding, which has become normalized in South Africa, and we're not able to continue the conversation. But you're still telling us about your own trajectory. And I had asked you the question, I'm going to ask again, that whether or not you were not angry or whether it was an anger that led you to the EFF, because my perception has always been that people in the EFF are really, really angry. They're angry at everything and at everyone, and that's a place where you go to vent your anger and not care what the world thinks. I mean, is that what it is? Is that what drove you there?
Look, I mean, I don't know about anger, but I'm a very passionate person. I think I was born with passion, to be honest, because I overwhelmed even my own mother. I mean, often my mother, literally, it's not even a joke. Hey? My mother couldn't handle me as a kid. Wow. I mean, I spent most of my time in boarding school and being raised by my grandmother initially before boarding school. And so, yeah, I think passion probably was the thing that drove me to them initially. Not so much anger, because I think, well, if I have to be personal, and really, I mean, your perspective of them, and I deliberately also don't mention the name of the entity, because I have a policy, I spent about 20 years in corporate, and I had a very beautiful corporate career. I worked in different industries. I did very well in basically everything I did. I tend to be a go-getter type character. That's I'm a typical daddy's girl. I'm a daddy's girl. I look like my dad. I behave like my dad. I have a brain like him.
I hope my daughter is going to watch this.
Well, if your daughter is a daddy's girl, if you know that you turned her into a daddy's girl, then voila. This is what she's going to be like.
No, she's a very independent person, but she would never admit to that, even if she were. She's like, I'm my own person. So, okay, fine.
But that's exactly what happens.
But she's as stubborn as you probably are.
That's what happens with daddy's girls. We just, you can't hold us back. We do what we want. And so I think what drove me to them was initially, obviously, being a politically active person from a very early age, even though I had a very successful career and, come from parents who are also working class. Both my parents worked over 40 years in the company. Back in the day, you could work that long. Yeah. My dad worked for a power generation company, a British power generation company. My mother worked for Johan Rupert's Checkers and ShopRite group for over 40 years. And so I come from an environment of discipline, but I also come from parents who are extremely progressive, a bit westernized, I would imagine. So I have my obsession with indigenous everything. To my granny to thank, honestly, because she was a very, very indigenous person. I mean, she couldn't even read and write in even her own mother tongue, but she could read symbols, African sort of symbols of communication. And she was an astute farmer, and she had yields from here to Cairo. People traveled afar in what used to be called the Eastern Transvaal to actually collect seeds from my grandmother. And so I think that at the time, having been an ordinary ANC member for a better part of my youth, driven by family, allegiances, and by this programming, this freedom fighting programming that we all basically were driven by, I would imagine, our entire lives. I was convinced that what you needed in South Africa was a change of a political party at the time. I was, obviously I'm of a different inclination now.
Right. Is that when Zuma or after Zuma? I mean, was it around the time when Zuma was
2013
when the EFF was kicked out?
They formed in 2013,
right?
And that's when I joined them.
Okay.
And everything is about space and time. Sure. And so at the time, the priority was, the economy. And of course, I'm a very economy obsessed person in terms of everything that I do. Right. My upbringing is about that. I mean, my grandmother was very self-sufficient. And my grandmother always emphasized, even before my dad sort of infused feminism into me, because I think from the age of 5 years, I was already a big fan of Winnie Mandela. Like, I think she was Winnie Mandela, Margaret Thatcher. Yeah. Those two women were basically the only two women that I knew. I mean, when other little girls were into like maybe, famous musicians, I was into Margaret Thatcher and
what about Indira Gandhi? You know about Indira Gandhi? She was
yes, of course. But I mean, my dad, whoever my dad, my dad was quite a fervent, I would say, womanist, feminist. And because we were all girls at home, my dad was very obsessed with making sure that we understand what independence is. Right. And so, having grown up with a grandmother who was also like that, but in an indigenous way, I had very, very strong, and I think I'm privileged because, I can't think of many people my age who actually had the best of all worlds in South Africa. I grew up in a deeply rural environment, very indigenous, very steeped, highly steeped in sort of ethical African values. Right. And then I grew up a bit in a township. And then I went to, Catholic, boarding schools, your missionary type of Catholic schools. My high school was Little Flower in Epopo, which was a specialist school in maths and science. And you had to have a certain grade before you could go there.
Not anymore. Now you need 30%.
No, well, who took it over.
Right.
You know what I always say, there's one thing, I mean, as much as I love being African and traditional African value systems, the African value systems that we all dream about, because obviously we're not living them anymore. As much as I'm about that, but I couldn't help but notice in South Africa that there's the hugest contradiction. Every time a town is renamed, from the colonial English or Afrikaans or Dutch name to whatever, an indigenous language name. Immediately after that, the town is followed by degeneration and degradation and sewage spilling in the streets. I don't know is it because maybe the white investors move out once it's no longer called
Well, I mean, it's like if you buy a Toyota Corolla or a Maserati or a BM and you decide, you know what, I'm going to give it my name because people who look like me worked on buildings. I mean, that's nonsense. Build your own car and give it your own name. I mean, maybe then you'll be proud of it from conception. If you just take over some stuff, free things are never appreciated.
And then, you know, the old me will argue, well, I mean, it's our land. And so, you know,
Yeah.
you know, as a way of reversing the mostly not self-imposed, but partly self-imposed low self-esteem that we tend to suffer from as Black people.
But
right?
I want us to touch on this, but let me take you back to the two events before we come back. Margaret Thatcher and Winnie Mandela were very strong women, but they were of two totally even opposing political inclinations. I mean, Margaret Thatcher was not averse to apartheid. Okay, I mean, she tended to look at South Africa from the economic perspective, right? We need that kind of state, and I think during the Cold War, one must put all of that into context. The West feared that Russia would or take over or China would have communist influence on South Africa. And that's not what they wanted. So between a communist-run South Africa at that geostrategic point of the world and a capitalist apartheid South Africa, it seems like they were happy to look away and leave the apartheid. Even, what's his name? The president of the US, what's his name? He was an actor.
Joe Biden.
No, he was an actor. He died. What's his name?
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan. I'm sure. Ronald Reagan at the time also said, the West needs a state like South Africa in that part of the world. So my question to you is, do you look at Thatcher as just a strong woman to emulate, which I definitely believe she was, or do you also look at some of the role that she could have played, probably to accelerate the end of apartheid?
Look, I mean, she wasn't really necessarily a fan of mine. She was just somebody that, you know, as I was explaining, my father's influence on my life and all the type of role models that my father encouraged us as females, because he was always very, you know, because he didn't have I think he has a son who's not my mother's child, but with my mother, you know, in their marriage, they didn't have sons. And, you know, as you would know, with the patriarchal laws that we had that basically dispossessed women of even themselves. You know, we were not even allowed to own ourselves under apartheid colonial laws, because even the West had these laws, right? So my father had that obsession about, you know, with the rise of the civil rights movement and the feminist movement in both Europe and North America. My father always wanted to, you know, inculcate that sense of progressiveness. And so, you know, I think he thought, okay, you know what, let me take women that are doing things that are like way ahead of their time, as you mentioned, Gandhi as well, and say, and enforce the image of power that surrounds those women onto my daughters.
Is he still around, your father?
Yes, he's 90.
Do you have these conversations with him? I mean, like, does he look at you and say, you know what, I did my best?
He's got a little, I don't know if it's not dementia, because the last psychosocial appointment I took him to, it was online, of course, recently, the psychologist said she was not convinced that he has full dementia, but he does have forgetfulness because, you know, your brain gets old. But he's still,
but I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, surely he was able to have conversations.
Yeah, but you know, you know what's amazing about you know, strong people, pretty much like the lion figurehead, right? When they get old, like all of us. And sometimes I look at him and I'm like, wow, I can't believe this is my dad. And you know, he still has the vibrancy. He's still very, very healthy. He's never had a disease and illness.
How old is he now? You said 92.
He's 91. Wow. No, he's 92 now. He just turned 92 in September. And very strong and very healthy. I mean, he's always been healthy and always very strong. Has a very good, I would imagine, I don't know, I suppose it's in the bloodline, because his age, that he doesn't carry his age at all.
That's good.
He just doesn't carry his age. I mean, a lot of people who meet my dad, when I tell them how old he is, they're like, no, you're lying. You know?
So you have a long way to go.
I think so. And now I'm into everything anti-aging, and I've changed my eating lifestyle. I don't eat anything. I try to minimize processed foods. I try to minimize bleached foods, you know, like your mealy meals and your white rices and flour, all the bleached stuff, white is right is no longer right,
Right.
So we've just learned that white is actually wrong.
Yeah, no, I mean, we are all products. We are all products of what we've inherited genetically, but also lifestyle. So if we eat the wrong things, we have a bad lifestyle. We don't exercise. We put all sorts of wrong things into our bodies. We shouldn't be surprised when at 65 we look like we're 85.
And overeating. It's amazing.
And overeating, yeah.
How, we just eat too much. Yeah. And by the way, I moved from being a sugar addict to my current position. I was like, I've been addicted to sugar for as long as I knew myself until guess when? I think 3 years ago when I decided.
That's okay. You stop. That's good. That's good. No, but it's good. It's very good. More people need to do this.
3 years ago.
Yeah, I used to take sugar in my coffee long ago, but I stopped. My father was 91, going for about 92 when he died. And when you looked at him, he was strong. He never used a cane to walk around. He was the only thing he said was, "I'm tired, dude. I'm tired." Because most of his friends had gone. He was lonely. He would spend all day reading papers, and he was maybe thinking, "What am I doing here? I've done what I could." And he said, "Okay, let me let go." And I think it was a mental thing. And he said, "You know what? I'm done."
In my mind, I see you looking like your dad.
Yeah, but ideologically, my father and I were not quite in the same. Well, he was a very quiet person. I grew up as a shy. I think shy-ish young man. Maybe
shy and good-looking. Those are normally the type of people that women like.
Yeah, I think I found my voice in the latter part of my life, and I'm happy. At least I have the wisdom and the scars and the pains and the bruises of my youth. But this is not about you. This is not about me. It's about you.
But all of that, the pains and all of that don't show you. I mean, if your wife allows you to be complimented, you probably. I mean, if there was a competition in South Africa, maybe top 20, 50.
Right.
Hot guys.
Oh, that's so cute. Oh, say it again. I think we have to own since I moved to where I am now, I lost 17 kilograms. I cycle every day. I look a lot better. I feel a lot better than I did when I was in South Africa.
You do.
So health-wise, I'm feeling very good. Yeah.
Your skin is beautiful.
But I want us to go back. I now remember something else that we were discussing before, we got disturbed the last time. You didn't want to talk about the EFF, this entity. Yeah. And I say kindly to you that you are everything you've mentioned, everything that you mentioned from your upbringing, your father, the Mandisa who's sitting in front of me now is a product of all that. The professional work in the corporate that you did, all of that stuff is you. The EFF is you. You can't write your memoir one day and blank out the EFF, because that would be that would be unfair. Because it was a patch that you went through. It was great. Yeah. There were good moments. There are highs. There are lows. It's politics that counts with it, and I think you should own it. And I really would like you to invite you to own it. I mean, tell us about the good, the bad, and the ugly in your own words.
Look, I do own it. It's just I'm a fervent believer of, release and let go.
Yeah.
Live and let live. And so maybe in hindsight, I should have probably opened up a little bit more about my experiences with that organization. But also, my emotional maturity, and if I could also add maybe intellectual maturity, because I do believe there's something like intellectual maturity. Yeah, we can all study science and mathematics and beautiful subjects and, neuroscience and all sorts of fancy things and know them very well. But if we can't blend that with a sense of maturity and a sense of being grounded, also there's a sense of civic duty, we basically won't be of any good to ourselves. So I try to minimize talking about the organization because and this I've spoken about openly before. I got to do work that I was very happy about. If I have to assess myself.
Was that when we were in the provincial legislature in Gauteng?
Well, just basically as a member,
okay.
just as an ordinary member, not even an elected member or whatever, leader in the organization. I was very happy with the work that I did because I always live my values. And one of the reasons that the corporate environment became extremely difficult also for me. Yes, I did change jobs quite a lot because, you know, that's what you do in South Africa's corporate environment. It's a racist environment. And we all have to be very honest about it. You know, the South African corporate environment is extremely racist. And its racism is hidden, right? It's hidden in all sorts of nuances. I mean, it maintains the so-called apartheid wage gap, which is also a gender wage gap, which is a racial gender wage gap. You know, it's very blind to you know, to productivity. It's always biased and you know, against especially black females. And it's a very tokenistic space where you know, they'll put you in a soft position as a black female, and if you're too smart for your own good, I mean, I was called a cheat.
But all companies, I mean, we'll come back to this. All companies in South Africa are not owned by white people, or many of them might be maybe majority owned by white people.
Corporations are. The corporations
are. But I want us to, wait. I don't, wait. Let me lead in. I want us to talk about this. Also, I want us to talk about the role of black executives on boards of these major. Some of them are executives on the board. Some of them are shareholders. What role do they play? But before we get to that, let's finish the EFF side. You were telling me about your journey.
That's where I was going. Okay. You know, let me tell you, right? I'm very experienced discussing this, and your reaction is exactly what I normally get from people either my age or older than me, who tend to become very protective about the realities, and they tend to be men. Surprise.
No, I'm not protecting anything. I love your voice, but the thing is, I'm trying to finish your topic and then move to another, because
that's where I was at.
I'm curious. This is what WorldView is about. I want everything. I want your view. Don't censor yourself.
So the you know, I was trying to make a point and I wanted to link the two.
Okay, sorry.
And I do tend to have a long thinking process, and my voice, you know, I tend to speak a little bit slowly. Okay. But I was trying to marry the idea will come back to me. But let me stick to this one aspect, right? So when I joined the
EFF, the entity
at the time, I was driven by my own private personal belief in what I think what I thought at the time South Africa needed from a government point of view, or actually from a societal point of view, but from my limited understanding of politics, I must be honest, because once I then got into certain roles and doing work on, you know, in various communities, predominantly with poor communities, which is also something else that I've changed my mind about. I think it's a wrong format to focus on political work on poor Black communities, for the simple reason that yes, of course, there are working class communities, right? So we have a lot of people in all townships and peri-urban areas and rural areas who are basically, you know, all of them are basically in the working class, whether they're unemployed or employed, but who also tend to be, majority of them tend to be in the lower income earning, you know, clusters of the income, you know, segments. And then, of course, like communities such as Soweto, for instance, and Atteridgeville, Mamelodi, etc., have got a very high middle class income, you know, earning group. But I do believe that as Black people politically, especially Black people in the middle class, or Black people who are tend to be, you know, in leadership positions in whatever industries they operate in, the biggest mistake we make is thinking that our politics and influencing government policy through lawmaking is actually something that we can only do by engaging predominantly you know, the township specifically, and the rural areas, basically the Black, you know, population, we tend to shy away. And so I was at that point, right, where my understanding of politics was really only carved from, I would imagine, the sort of ANC-centric, I would call it, way of thinking because of my upbringing. And obviously I'm not unique. Many of us
So it was like, would you describe it as on-the-ground activism, but you need to go beyond the on-the-ground activism?
On the ground shouldn't only be from an apartheid lens.
Yeah.
Because you must remember that our apartheid and colonial history is very much our generational curse for us in this current generation, because we can't shirk it off. You can't wish it away, even if you wanted to wish it away. It's what do I call it? It's vestiges. It's lived experience.
Right.
It will last for a long time, and no thanks to certain people, it's actually living with us a long time. So I joined them at the time when I firmly believed that, look, the only way to change South Africa's landscape of inequality and poverty and crime is to actually, one, join a political party. I no longer was convinced about the ANC like I am not now, and like I will never be ever again. But I had the limited view that you could only make changes through politics. And so for me, it was like also a sacrifice, because I basically quit quite a cushy job at the time, in the cell phone.
Was your departure sudden, or did you think one day when you leave, say, an abusive partner, usually you don't leave the day you think about it?
I first resigned in 2016.
Sorry?
I first resigned in 2016.
Okay.
And this is something I do speak about openly.
Yeah.
So I'm very limited about what I say about them as an organization, because I'm a firm believer of moving on.
Right.
And I also believe that my experience may or may not be the same as someone else's experience. I believe that time basically resolves most, if not.
Are there truths about, or things that happened that were said that that you would rather not face now, but you might probably write in a memoir one day, because the truth has to come out. It always finds a way to come out.
Perhaps one day, but I definitely resigned about 4 years before my final resignation. I wrote a resignation letter and I just didn't submit it, but we held a meeting with two of the senior leaders, and to tell them that, look, I'm giving. I was still approaching my life from a very professional. I always try to be as professional as I can, and maybe just show some courtesy to people that I work with in whatever format. But at the time when I first resigned, I gave a 6-month notice, and I opened the discussion to say, look, allow me to walk away. And what I was, besides being a female, and the realities of the dangers of leading an organization like that as a female who is genuine. I can't be instructed. I'm a very, very difficult person to instruct. I can only take an instruction from someone else. I don't care whether you're a billionaire, because my father trained me in a very.
When is your birthday? Just curious.
On the 26th of August. I'm a Virgo who's on the cusp of Leo.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. So I basically can't be instructed. I mean, it's something I accepted. My parents, my father made sure that we become like that. My father said, listen, when someone tells you to do something, rather say no, because you can always change your mind later and say yes.
So it's better when it's presented as a suggestion? It's a suggestion? No. I mean, if I'm your boss and I need you to, I don't know, to deal with the client over there, how do I put it to you?
I believe all human beings are intelligent. And when you instruct somebody, even I don't believe.
No, but how do you take it? How do you take
I believe, because remember, we all move from the South. I can't do something that I don't expect someone else, to do the way I do it.
Okay.
If you're going to give me an instruction, you better make sure that instruction is, one, rational, two, basically intelligent, like just basic intelligence. There must be some basic intelligence in that instruction. And then, of course, it must be just, because for me, justice is everything, right?
But if you work in a restaurant and the manager says, look, you need to clean that table over there because we have clients that are coming. I mean,
but if it's rational, I'm saying to you, Solly, I do not take instructions that are not rational, that are not intelligent, that are not just. That's who I am.
Right.
When you are in a and the problem with South Africa is that men in South Africa, both white and obviously primarily white and then black, have become so accustomed to being bosses off from home, like they even men have become accustomed to being bosses even of our wombs as women. Like, so it's like if a woman can't give birth to a boy child, then she's she's some kind of a loser, or she's some kind of degenerate, because that is how repressive, gender repressive society is. The whole of society is like that. I mean, we had laws that basically said a woman may not own anything. We had laws, not just in South Africa, in all the Western colonized territories and the Western colonizing countries like
well, in Iran today, they're arresting people for not wanting to wear hijabs. I mean, God, it doesn't end.
What is that crazy country? Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a country that I cannot imagine myself even like visiting for an hour. I would be dead in an hour in Afghanistan. I guarantee you.
We'd have to muzzle you.
I would be dead, I think, even in Zimbabwe, because I also think Zimbabwe is a very repressive country.
Even Rwanda, people like to praise Rwanda. Rwanda is repressive. You criticize that man, you're out.
Talk about totalitarianism, right? And that Rwandan guy.
Oh, it's clean and everything. Oh, that guy doesn't respect human rights.
No, and the West loves him because of that, right? So, Western countries love any African leader who's willing to repress their own people.
I think the West is impressed by, the thing is, Kagame has managed to make people feel guilty about the genocide. And he's riding on it, but the same way that the ANC and the same way the ANC plays on apartheid to ask for money, we do that, and so these countries who feel guilty for not having done enough to stop the genocide, I would rather keep quiet and just give him what he wants. But anyway, we're diverting here. You and I are the same.
Yeah. Exactly. So all I'm saying is that really to maybe from my, as a parting shot for myself,
right,
about the political party you asked me about, is that I decided very early on that I wanted out, like I'm explaining to you. I think it was 2016, yes.
Right.
And obviously we then, had a certain conversation, and based on that conversation, I said, okay, that's fine, I'll stay on. Now, the other conundrum is that the violence that I experienced there was very real.
Personal violence against your person?
Yes, I experienced violence in meetings. I would chair meetings because remember I think I was acting as a chairperson for a big part of the first term.
Right.
And before being elected as a chair, because I was a deputy chair the first time, and then the chairperson had resigned. By the way, again, with South African media being so controlled by capitalist imperialistic forces, really, that are very racist as well, there was an attempt to make it look like that resignation of that guy had something to do with me, to the point where some newspaper even printed it and said it had something to do with me, and I just wouldn't participate in that. And I said, listen, I mean, you can't write an allegation that you can't back up and then call me and ask me to give you.
They should ask you first.
Just justification for writing it.
Right.
So
But what kind of violence? How did the violence manifest itself?
Oh, I mean, I was locked up in a school once, threatened with death. I would experience violence in meetings that I'm chairing.
Were they men, were the women who defended you? I mean, I assume that the violence came from them. No.
Look, I mean, when you're in an environment where you're leading people whose value systems are not the same as yours. Look, I mean, I can tell you, I was openly told things like, you're going to die poor because, you don't want a tender. I would be told things like, I once approached somebody and I said, but one of our core values is that we definitely don't want the tender system anymore because we can see how destructive it is. There's many other ways of building and maintaining infrastructure in the country without the tender. Definitely the tender system is a massive temptation for an uncreative people and leader who doesn't know how to drive the economy to put it to a place where it can give them the money that they want without committing crimes and stealing and robbing the people. And I was told, oh, well, this is why we can't work with you, because this is the kind of person you are. And I was referred to as ungovernable. There was a time when DA leaders would call me You know, I work very closely with opposition parties in the legislature on issues of principle and economic and social relevance. And so they would tell me confidentially things that are being said about me in Parliament, in the National Assembly, in their corridors when they're talking leader to leader, to say, no, don't discuss anything with that one. She has no power. She has no influence. She's just an ungovernable, reckless, out of control woman. And these were comments that I know for a fact. I mean, I can't say who said them and who they said them.
But did women support you? Other women leaders in the EFF? Because that's what we're talking about.
Firstly, it didn't bother me. It didn't bother me whether women supported me or not. Because
I'm asking you this because you started by talking about this toxic male masculinity. I'm using the expression, you didn't use it.
Listen, women can't support other women in a world where men are in charge. Okay, because there's no incentive to support a woman. In fact, quite the opposite. If you support a woman, okay, and you're a woman, you're most likely to go down with that woman. So when women look at you and they're like, oh, there's the troublemaker Mandisa, they're going to run so far away from you because shame, you know, people don't want to lose their deployments to Parliament because unlike us, unlike people like me who actually have careers, who actually have some kind of credible background to fall back on, some who actually have skills to rely on, and some kind of value system as well. I've got a very intrinsic value system that I would die for, literally, wrong or right. Nobody's going to support you and risk losing a salary of R1 million when they didn't even earn 10,000 Rand a month, or they were even unemployed before.
Where were you when VBS happened?
I was there. I was there. I was in the membership. I was a member. I was in the leadership. And my biggest disappointment with VBS, because I was asked about it, I think it was a couple of TV channels. They asked me and they said to me, what do you think should happen? I'm like, the fact that you're asking me this question is highly dysfunctional. I don't understand in South Africa why corruption and crime is politicized. If I steal anything, I should be arrested. Anybody who steals anything should be arrested, let alone a crime of such magnitude.
But the media just asked the question. They're not people who arrest. The people who arrest, we know that through state capture.
Listen, the media asks the wrong questions.
Okay.
I asked them, I said to them, what do you want me to say? Let's discuss, because I knew they wanted a sensational discussion about the people who were implicated that I happened to be colleagues of.
Right.
Right? And I said, I don't know what you want me to say. I don't understand why in South Africa there needs to be permission given for people to be arrested. It's a very simple, I think it's very, I looked at the entire thing, and it's not just VBS, by the way. There's a whole lot of, very strong allegations out there about all sorts of people in this country, not just people I happened to be, members of a political party with, who have been, and when let's say you read an investigative piece that's written and you look at the likelihood of the evidence that is detailed there, you're like, wow, this kind of evidence is the kind of evidence that is enough for you to just be called in and questioned. Right?
Yeah.
People don't get called in and questioned. There's basically no arrest. There's, I don't know, maybe there's a fear that
because through state capture, the criminal justice system was captured. When Fikile Mbalula was appointed Minister of Police at the height of state capture, even after former Public Protector Fikile Mbalula had issued her report, people knew what was going on. So, and people also knew that the Guptas played a part in the appointment of ministers and other executives in boards of SOEs and stuff like that. So surely the Guptas would not have appointed Fikile Mbalula if they knew they wouldn't be safe with him. So he knows something. So, I mean, like the police can't act because the report to Fikile is useless. He's not going to act against police, his comrades. So the whole system was rotten. That's why the media can only just ask questions and expose, write books, but they can't arrest people. The NPA, the police, the Hawks must arrest people. They don't do it.
I do understand that, and I do appreciate the sensitive, position that mainstream media finds themselves in. But I also do believe genuinely that it's time that, if you have, I mean, the media is a very critical part of keeping our society, at least as balanced as possible. I mean, obviously, given the economic situation and the disparities and the inequalities. But I do believe that sometimes, calling a Mandisa and asking her, so what do you think of this crime? It's really borders on sensationalism and a little bit of, I'm not sure, for me, it was a very suspicious question. Okay. I was called in and I was really ambushed with questions about VBS this, VBS that. And they asked me, so what do you think should happen to so-and-so, considering there are such strong allegations? I said, well, what would you suggest should happen to me if those allegations were made against me, or let's say my mother or my sister? Right. Well, what would you as a journalist want to see happen? Because what you want to see happen is exactly what I want to see happen. And if it doesn't happen, what does it mean, right? Why do you want me to be the one to say it? Do understand that in the, okay, I want to go back to the violence issue. There was outright violence I was exposed to more times than I cared to talk about. And so there was a direct and real danger to my life. But because I, held on so strongly to the belief that I really could make a change, that I actually believed that if I worked honestly, as I always do, I mean, I've never in my life had allegations anywhere I worked of any kind, and search until you're blue in the face. Because generally, I'm just not, let's put it this way, I just don't see the value in doing things and maybe acquiring assets or money in a way that is just illegal. I'm so scared of jail, like I'm a claustrophobic person.
Just a bit of a correction. People with this skin color don't become blue in the face, become more gray and shrinked. It's a Caucasian type who become blue, okay? So please,
we're speaking English now.
I know. I'm just
penmanship, and it is what it is. We're here now, Yeah. So I just my value system is so strong, and sometimes it becomes my biggest weakness, because when I really, really believe in something, I just don't think too much about it. But
have you ever reported anyone who committed crime to the police? Because as a citizen, you also have a responsibility.
Oh, I opened many cases, right? Okay. Firstly, you must understand that as a complainant, you become witness number one in the South African system, right? So I open a case, I then have to be the complainant and the witness, right? I can also be a victim, by the way. But yeah, so I did open lots of cases. I've opened cases wherein I had evidence, because as a complainant, if you open a case and you do not have the evidence directly, right? So you can't. I mean, you're going to lose the case in court, because what will happen is, if you do not have control over the witnesses or the evidence that needs to be submitted to strengthen your case, you're going to lose the case. And in a violent society, you're going to get hurt, especially if you're a woman. If I open a case against a man or even a woman who's involved in very serious organized crime, as is often the case, and you don't have a strong case, the police are not going to protect you, because half the time the police are involved in the further criminalization of the very case, because they sell dockets, they lose dockets. They also do something called, I forget the name, but they archive dockets, right? When they want to lose a docket legally, they just archive it. Wow. I had a case that
archive it, like hid it in the box that's
literally archive it.
Yeah, you can
literally
find it.
File it. And then they put a story around it. I think in America, they refer to them as cold cases, right? But in South Africa, the police are so corrupt and so incompetent and have no conscience whatsoever, right? They literally will take a case and decide that this case is not winnable in court. They take decisions like that. I forcefully had a case opened at a police station. We had to go and pick it there first, and I had to make a whole lot of noise and threats and do crazy stuff to force the station commander to basically, do something which is fully within his authority,
right.
which is to reopen the case. And he sat me down, he said, no, we archived this case. And I'm like, why did you archive the case? Because I'm sitting with a complainant who has now come to us and said, her case is not being advanced. When she calls the investigating officer, he's shady, he becomes shady. And by the way, it could be a she as well, because it's not only the males that are corrupt. You know, corruption eats you up. It's up the entire system, and it corrupts absolutely everybody. And he said to me, no, we archived it. And I said to him, like, you filed it. He's like, yeah, we archived it. And I'm like,
is it the same as to we closed the case? We archived it, we closed it.
Well, yeah, archiving is safer than saying close, because closure is like very fine, right?
Right.
So if you close it, you're going to have to reopen a new one.
Okay, so if you archive it, that's it.
Yeah. So, you know, like we've got little criminals running our South African government everywhere, especially in the criminal justice system. Operative word, criminal, right? The criminalness of the justice system, right? So they find like very creative loopholes. So
technicalities.
So when he archives the case, right, he doesn't stand to be negatively judged by IPID, for instance.
Right.
Because obviously my next step would have been to go to IPID and then complain about his station, the investigating officer himself. But because he archived it, I didn't really have grounds to complain, because I did say to him, listen, I'm going to write a letter to the head of IPID in Gauteng. I'll copy the national one and tell them about this injustice, because I actually want to now lodge a complaint against you guys on top of getting the case to court urgently that you've archived. Technically, you can't, because IPID will say, well, they didn't close the case. They archived it on grounds of lack of evidence. And then they couldn't prove that there was no evidence. I could prove that they had evidence because I had the witness who was the complainant, who was also the victim.
Right.
So basically, to answer your question, I opened several cases. I've got cases now that I opened against Barbara Creasy, against David Makura. I almost opened a case against Banyaza, but
But you've never opened cases against your own colleagues who were involved in corruption?
I didn't have evidence. There were many people who asked me about VPS, and I said, listen, I don't have evidence. If you can give me evidence, because the cases I opened, I have the evidence, right? I've got a file with the evidence. What are you going to do? You're going to get killed.
Tell me, have you met Mazzotti, this dude who is always open?
I don't remember meeting him. I don't remember.
What does it mean? That's what ANC people say. Either we met somebody or we haven't. There was this thing about, I don't remember meeting somebody. Come on,
I don't remember meeting him at all, because remember, with the
Mandisa,
we had lots of events. Listen, I don't know the guy. Number one.
So you've never had a conversation with him like, hello, my name is Mandisa. Never.
That's why I'm saying I don't remember, because we had a lot of events, right? And some of our events, obviously we'd have a lot. I mean, I would also invite business people to come and donate. I would invite anybody that I thought.
So you might or you might not have met him.
I may have met him like informally, quickly, like hi, and not actually remember, because I don't know the guy very well. I know his face from from photographs and all of that. I generally, even if you at an event, let's say it's a VIP section of an event, everybody's chatting and socializing, and somebody might pull you, hey, this is so and so, this is so and so, and that's it. So that's why I'm saying I don't remember meeting him. I certainly don't know him. He certainly doesn't know me.
But his name was there because he was one of the biggest.
His name I know from the media, actually.
No, there was no discussion in the party leadership. So, Mazzotti is going to give us 5 million this time or something like that.
I don't remember such conversations. Let me tell you.
When you talk about the funders of the party, surely there must be a list of, so and so we're getting so much from this one, so much from this one, so much. His name never came up in those conversations?
In what sense? Like in meetings? Because
you're part of the senior leadership of the party.
I didn't have a social relationship with.
No. My question is.
Look, I can.
Let me ask you a question.
If you, for instance, ask me about Dalimpofu,
I'm not asking about that.
I want to give you an example. I've been to his house. He's somebody that I was very personally close to. as like somebody that I could, you know,
Yeah,
as
but I'm not interested in Dalimpovo.
And so I would.
Can I ask you a question? I'm
Yes,
not asking about
I'm
Dalimpovo.
answering you. I'm
Okay.
saying, you see, this is the type of interrogation that I do not appreciate, because I have not stolen from you, Solly. I have not stolen a cent from South Africans, never in my entire life.
No, but Mandisa,
And so
I'm not accusing you of anything.
I don't think it's fair for us to have an interrogative conversation.
No, but you want to tell me something. I'm not asking.
I'm trying to
I invited
answer
you to an interview.
I don't know Mazzotti.
Okay.
I don't even, Mazzotti is his surname, right? I don't even know his first name unless you say it now. Then I'll be like, okay, now I know.
That's fine. That's fine.
All I know about the guy is what I have read, few articles that I've read. I was trying to say to you so that you understand, I generally was not personal friends with the senior leaders of the party. That is why I tried to bring in Dalimpofu, because with him, we were not like bosom buddies, of course, but I had a much more social and closer relationship, personal relationship with him than basically anybody else. And then I was close to one or two, maybe 4 or 5 of the other national leaders who served in the national structure, like in the additional structures. But in the top leadership, I was not personal friends with them.
Okay,
and
let's move on.
I didn't move in their circles. And when, for instance, I fundraised for the party, it would be, you know, for my own programs. Like, let's say maybe there was a protest and I didn't have money for taxis to collect, you know, activist supporters and picketers, like a small sort of, let's say 100 people. There are people I would call and say, listen, would you like to help me out? And I'm very popular, or infamous rather, in the context that I would ask people that I know have extra money to spare and make it very clear to them that, listen, please don't come back to me and tell me because you paid for 5 taxis or 2 buses that tomorrow, you know, you want. A donation is a donation to a public cause. I've given you the reason why I need the transport or the food or whatever for the protesters, and it ends there. If this is going to become an indebtedness of some sorts, then please, you know, don't help out. And so and this is exactly my problem with proportional representation in South Africa and the electoral culture, not culture, but the law of South Africa. Because the party list system says that, you know, whatever the party decides who goes onto a list, etc., versus constituencies, versus direct voters. You tended to be, and which is something I really, really didn't like, because it limits your freedom and it even limits your ability to serve your constituency with genuine honesty and transparency. Because sometimes, yes, like I said to you earlier, people would make comments to you about, you know, your limited future in politics because, you know, you have certain unrealistic morals and you refuse to do certain things.
Yeah, okay. Look. Yeah, we're talking about. I want us to move on away from the EFF to broader South Africa. The ANC is going to host the African National Congress is going to host its next elective conference in December. And there's a whole pala issue. Ramaphosa looking back at the numbers, it looks like he's going to win, and he might have a certain Mr. Mkhize as deputy if nothing happens from the floor. Does it matter to you whether Ramaphosa stays on? I mean, this is about the ANC, but we know that the ANC remains the Makulu bus of South African politics, right? Until 2024. Hopefully, after that, they can be stopped. But until then, they have the electoral mandate. Does it matter to you who wins in December, and what do you hope would be a better outcome for South Africa?
I think to compare South African political parties to stokvels is an insult to stokvels.
Okay.
Because in a stokvel, you know, your powers are clearly defined, and you have no reason to fear because you've got a constitution that you respect, you know, because you're looking after one another's money, and there must be trust, you know, honesty. It doesn't matter. You could go and take basically a very intelligent baboon from the wild and train it how to lead a political party, and it would lead it. without trauma. The ANC is institutionalized, has institutionalized. The leaders of the ANC, generation after generation, like other parties, have institutionalized corruption themselves. And so the issue of, I mean, you mentioned it earlier, right? So for instance, if the ANC as a governing party that has been governing majority provinces and the whole country and majority municipalities since 1994 and 96, respectively, with municipalities, if they were genuine about the development, and even some of the opposition parties that some of us were members of, if they or we were genuine about progress and eradicating poverty and inequality and crime in South Africa and having as functional a country as you possibly can get, the first thing they would have done would have been to create independent entities in the criminal justice system, so that the NPA is independent of every other entity. The what do you call it? The judiciary is independent of the others. The police are independent of everybody else. IPID is independent of everybody. SIU is independent of everybody else. Everybody, whoever, as long as they are involved in managing, not managing crime, but preventing crime and punishing crime where it happens, that would have been their first priority, to make sure that we do not have a minister of police who actually appoints commissioners, appoints the the head of the IPID, a minister who appoints judges, who appoints magistrates, who appoints
the head of the IDP or fire. That's crazy.
How do you it's like big pharma. It's exactly the imperialist structures of the world, which are all the industry, the industry captains of global markets, the capitalists and the governments are basically in on this thing. I mean, Pfizer and Moderna, I'm not veering off. I just want to give you a clear correlation of why I'm just so demoralized as well with just the structure of the world economically. Pfizer and Moderna now today are saying with the CDC, this Center for Disease Control in America, with the CDC's blessing, that they are going to investigate the potential relationship between the vaccines, their vaccines, the COVID-19 vaccines, and the rate of death.
Yeah, I saw that. But let's go back to the ANC.
Cancer,
I saw that.
right?
Let's go back to the ANC. What do you think should come out?
I want to give you a direct.
We don't have, the thing is, we're going to run out of time now.
The ANC is part of the global imperialistic system. They've been part of it since they were formed in 1912, right? They were formed with the blessings of Britain, and the Queen basically.
Even in 1912, at the beginning.
Of course, the first visit that the ANC made was to the Queen in 1913. John Dube was sent to go and meet the Queen in 1913.
Right, to present his credentials.
To report back on, okay, we did get all the kings and queens together and we are doing this thing. And because also when the Land Act was passed in 1913, the ANC didn't object at the time as a newly formed organization at the time under a different name, Natives, whatever Congress. Yeah, the only people who objected to the Land Act were women under Charlotte Maxeke. Those were the only people who objected and even marched and protested and did all sorts of things. But let's come back to this. Moderna and Pfizer are investigating themselves. It's exactly the same thing that happens in the South African government. You have a political party that takes over government. It says, no, we want to reverse the negative impacts of the colonial apartheid and colonial eras that we've come from over the last, say, 300 years. And the one tool they have to allow that, because you must remember that the ANC took over also a very criminal government, all right? So the first thing they should have done, if they wanted to see justice against the apartheid system and to ensure justice going forward, would have been to render the criminal justice system completely independent and run by.
But remember that our post-apartheid setup is a result of a multi-party negotiation. So we have a hall maybe filled with crooks and not crooks, and they all decided, okay, this is how we're going to run going forward, right? This is your term, this is your term, this is your term. Yeah. And who goes to jail, who doesn't go to jail, and we know the whole story about the TRC, that the big guys who made the decisions didn't go to jail, the small guys who carry the guns went to jail. It's almost like they got the
women
mafia,
and
right?
the poor people, the black women and the poor people go to jail.
Yeah. But I mean, is there something that you hope will come out of the ANC conference that will give us some hope for South Africa heading towards 2024? You, President, when you look at it, all you like say, oh, let them go on. It won't make any difference.
I've written them. I wrote off the ANC in 2012 when I resigned as an ordinary member. And when I left, I think I was attending that conference in 2012. Was it in Mangaung? As obviously I think I was part of the communications and policy formulation subcommittee.
Right.
And yeah, I basically, I think that's when Jacob Zuma got re-elected. And then Ramaphosa, literally 4 months after, him and Jacob Zuma's implication in the massacre against the workers of Marikana, got elected. And I was like, no, I'm done. So I've been done with them ever since. I'm never, ever gonna, my hope, or rather, let me say, I'll never, ever put my hopes back in the ANC. It's obvious that it's a fait accompli. I mean, they're not going to self-correct, as you say. They are exactly like, they've been trained by corrupt imperialistic capitalist, structures that run the world. And they do exactly as they are told by their masters. And their masters will protect them at a global level, as long as they also get, as long as they're digging our minerals and getting them, the amount of coal that is leaving South Africa, for international markets. For instance, Germany now has confirmed that they're reopening their coal.
Most European countries, because of the war in Ukraine, they need. Look, it's winter in Europe, so people need to warm their citizens. If their citizens don't feel warm,
but we can't burn coal. But they can burn coal. Then there's the whole climate change
complicated stuff
about carbon and how we are being overrun by carbon, when carbon is 0.04% of the entire makeup of the atmosphere.
Yeah, we should have a conversation about this thing called just transition the next time you and I talk, where there's all the loans that are coming through, where's the money going to go, who's going to manage them, what's the interest rate, all that. This is a discussion for another day. But I wonder one question. Do you think Malema has got this thing in his head, or people around him make him believe that he's the next president of South Africa? Do you think he'd make a good president of South Africa? Julius Malema, the chief, what do you call him, CIC, whatever?
No comment. I don't want to be insulted on social media.
No, but you are a citizen of South Africa. Do you think this man?
But you won't be there when the insults, when they start mobilizing the bots and I don't have the heart to take that kind of look. I wouldn't vote for them. I don't vote for them. I'm not their member anymore. I don't mobilize. I don't campaign. I don't vote for them. And so my answer is the same. If I'm not gonna, if you ask me, if, like, for instance, would you make a good president? If I say no, I'm not voting for Solly. Why would I say Solly would make a good president if I'm not even voting for him? You know what I mean? And so, but also I like peace. I can have an intellectual debate. I can have an argument, I'm good for it. But in a gentleman and a lady space, I'm not going to risk my life saying things.
Well, I can say, let me tell you, Julius Malema doesn't have the pedigree to be the president of the Republic of South Africa. Boom. He shouldn't be president of South Africa. The EFF should never be the governing party of South Africa. Otherwise, we're going to be in a mess. They must not. They must stay at 10%, even go lower. Solimwe, hello.
Yeah, let's see them come down and
let them come down and never give it them.
Get your bots to defend yourself. Me, I want peace, right? If I'm not voting for your party and I'm not voting for you, then clearly I do not think that you could be a good leader, or that you could be maybe not a good leader, but like an effective leader to take the country forward. Listen, I don't even think political parties are the solution anymore. I'm in the electoral reforms lobby group now. We have very progressive discussions with the 70s group and the entire, all the other NGOs.
But what role would you like to play going forward in the NGO space, not in politics? To help, because South Africa still needs to heal, and people like yourself are needed.
No, I would. If they can level the playing field, because obviously it's a bit of a contradiction in terms. We won the case as New Nation Movement, and we are in the process of establishing the Citizens Parliament so that we can create a mobilization platform as well as an educational platform, because a lot of South Africans don't actually understand what's wrong with government and why we don't have accountability and transparency, right? And why it's so difficult to actually entrench it. It's because of the law and it's because of the electoral law. That's the first problem. South Africans really don't understand, so they need a bit of education. And so if the playing field was leveled, because currently it's not leveled, like for instance, after we won the case with New Nation Movement in 2020 in the Concord to say that, to declare the Electoral Act unconstitutional, Parliament started playing all sorts of games. And you can't really expect somebody who believes that, who's narrow-minded or single-track-minded, and who believes that, look, this is my livelihood and I can't survive without this.
They will be working against their own
to change. Right. Exactly. And also the political party system that we have encourages bullying. So I can represent maybe 20,000 people who, as long as they believe that I can bully everybody else on their behalf, for their benefit, they'll continue supporting me, right?
Do you think progressive South Africans should come together ahead of the 2024 elections to create some kind of UDF style? Let's work together, irrespective of, we might have, convergences and divergences, places where we agree, places where we disagree, but let's agree on the principles that will make South Africa strong again, and hopefully push for those. Do you think that should happen or not, Trey? Or should everyone keep running in their own silos?
I think it's already happening. It might be happening at a much smaller or slower pace than we would like, but it is already happening. If you consider, Solly, that I think it's a bit debatable, but it's between 14 or 15 and 17 million people who just have not even bothered to register to vote.
Yeah.
And then in the base that is registered, which is about 26 million.
But how do you get them? How do you mobilize those people? Surely you need to make them dream again.
It is extremely difficult because most of them are people who either just are anti the political system, like for instance, others are in religious groupings who basically don't believe in voting, right? And so one of the things that we definitely need to also push forward
do they not believe in voting because of their religion, or have they stopped believing in voting because they don't think it's delivering the results they would like to see?
Some in the religious circles, it's mainly because of their religion. Like they'll tell you point blank that, look, in my church or my grouping, voting is, I think, and I stand corrected, I think the Jehovah's Witness might be one of them. I mean, they might not be a very large church, but they do have influence over their families. So there are others like that. And also the fact that the law, unlike I think, is it New Zealand and Australia, where you are compelled by law to vote. And if you don't, there's punitive measures. I think it might be tax or whatever other government benefits that you get locked out of. But you are basically forced to vote, because if you are not forced to vote,
it's a civic duty, responsibility.
It's also a democratic requirement, because remember, for us to say that, okay, Solly Muweng's PTY Limited political party won the elections, we need to prove that a solid majority of the adult voting population voted, right? And then you win out of that. So currently we are slowly moving towards a time when we'll see a minority, which means less than 50% of the people who have registered to vote participating in voting. And so again, we'll be, as we are now, basically led by a system which I can really define as a dictatorship of the minority.
Do you trust the Electoral Commission of South Africa? I mean, we call it the independent.
They are not independent, number one.
I know, that's why I'm struggling with that word. Do you trust them?
No. If they, you know why I don't trust them? It's not personal, because I don't know them actually personally. I think the only person I knew there before personally was Terry Tsilane, and he's not there anymore. But they are not independent, and they do not have the best interests of South Africans at heart. I think majority of people who basically work in government and state agencies have got what I call a poverty blockage. They're so scared of poverty, like all of us, we come from
poverty. Or they dream
of
the next big deployment.
Because they're so scared of poverty, they'll do anything to secure a salary. And the IEC is no different, even their commissioners. I mean, it's so amazing that we, from the New Nation movement, had to basically teach these people, right? I mean, let me tell you, they fought against the case from 2014. They challenged it. There's even an organization, I think, there's a Naidu guy who leads an organization called CASAC. The guy's organization joined Home Affairs and the Office of the Speaker and IEC to fight our case the first time. Even the second time, right? IEC fought our case, which means they said no.
Well, they don't want you to be registered.
No. They fought the case to have the Electoral Act declared unconstitutional.
Okay.
That is why I don't trust them. Yeah. I mean, if you are given the responsibility to say, look, here's an act. By the way, the IEC have their own.
But they also tried to argue for the elections to be cancelled last year. The IEC, they went to the courts to ask the courts to help them cancel the elections. The court said, no, go ahead, go and do your. Well, no, there's a different. Postpone is within 3 months. Cancel if you want to push it beyond 3 months. It's no longer cancel. Postpone, it's cancel. But they use the word postpone because it's easier.
I didn't have a problem, for instance, as a citizen, if they had postponed it, considering many things, right? And those things were basically to be blamed on government itself. Because
in hindsight, the court said, no, we voted, nothing went wrong, surely.
Of course. But in hindsight, the same constitutional court, right, as a custodian of the Constitution, never also in their own, except, I mean, even after the Van Zyl-Slabbert report, even after the Motlanthe report, the Van Zyl-Slabbert report that was commissioned by former President Thabo Mbeki, even after former President Nelson Mandela's speech in 1999, I think, when his last basically speech in Parliament when he was leaving, he emphasized that, look, guys, all of us, we know who are around the table negotiating. We agreed on certain principles. And one of the main ones is that this electoral system is not actually constitutional, and it's not suitable for South Africa to rebuild it. If it remains the same, it will be a danger to South Africa more than apartheid was. He said it. And he said, please, I'm leaving you all here in Parliament today with the understanding that this is the deadline. Let's not go to another election being against our own constitution that we designed, right? After all of that, none of these...
Mandisa, you and I have a lot to talk about, but this is going to go on. I would like us to have a conversation again in the future, not about the EFF, about South Africa, about Mandisa, look, people and institutions and bodies that play a part in making South Africa what it is, I think we cannot not talk about them. Otherwise, we'd be having sweetheart interviews or it's
a conflict of interest for me to talk about.
No, but you're not a member of them anymore.
No, I'm not. But
you can talk about the company that you used to employ. No, that's fine. I don't. The point I'm making.
I'm a lover, not a fighter.
I don't want the discussion to be about one thing, because it cannot be about one. South Africa is such a complex matter. I'm very fascinated by the fact that you are also interested in the whole thing of just transition, the coal, what speed, who's funding it, at what cost, who's benefiting, should ESCOM be nationalized, all of those is the economic direction of South Africa, the foreign policy of South Africa. I would like us to have this wide-ranging discussion in the future. But for now, we need to end. And I would like you to just take a minute to tell, if you were to say something that you hope to say to the audience watching this thing, what would you say to them? Just 1 minute, not even a minute. What is your parting shot?
Firstly, thanks for the conversation. But I also want to urge South Africans to say that, listen, nobody is coming to save us. Like nobody. Not Bill Gates. Even Elon Musk is not coming to save us. As much as I love him, he's my favorite billionaire, and I don't like billionaires. I think they're the biggest hoarders. We need to save ourselves. We need to start understanding that the laws that we pass in this country are laws that are going to be imposed on us. We need to determine those laws. And if they are wrong, we need to change them. The economy needs to be built by us, not by some white person coming from Europe or whoever, but we need to come together and build the economy. As Black people, we need to collaborate more. We need to approach the economic question from a position of confidence and from a position of self-love. We need to start loving ourselves so that we can make the necessary sacrifices for our children and posterity, and rebuild our country genuinely to remove crime and create safer spaces for all of us. And so what you're doing is wonderful, because you're collaborating with many people. All of us need to roll up our sleeves and do that. And there are no jobs. They're not going to be jobs. They're not actually coming back. The economy is changing. It needs to change. And our indigenous value systems is basically all we have left, that we don't have to buy from anybody. They don't have IPs. They are, free for us to use as we need. And so more collaborations, it doesn't matter whether it's in the political space or in the economic space, more love and more patience, and also the self-belief that we can actually build our own economy so that we're not beholden to some billionaires who are going to come and jab us every now and then when they want a profit or two.
Do you believe, one last question I can't resist, do you believe South Africa belongs to all who live in it? White, black, Indian, colored, straight, lesbian, gay, intersex, bisexual, everything, Muslim, Christian, non-believing. Do you believe that?
I actually do. I just differentiate between citizens. There are native citizens and there are settler citizens. And okay. I cannot believe in the Constitution and turn around and say, I don't believe that white people belong here. I have white ancestors. So there's nothing I can do about it. I definitely believe that South Africa belongs to all of us who have its best interests at heart.
Okay. Mandisa Mashego, you say you're a power lady. Those ladies that you mentioned earlier, you're one of them. So you shouldn't hide the light under the table. Light was never meant to be hidden under the table. You must sit on the table and brighten the world around it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're going to do this again.
Thanks, Solly. Have fun in Switzerland.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it. I mean, it is a really challenging conversation to have with such a strong lady who's like, I found myself having to fight over territory at some point. Whether she was determining the direction of the discussion or I was, but it was fun. I really absolutely enjoyed talking to Mandisa Mashego. I would like to do it again in the future. And we'll probably not talk about the EFF, not too much, at least, because that really does touch her a little bit in places where I don't want it to be touched. If you've come this far in this conversation, it means you've enjoyed it. Please keep following, subscribing, sharing WorldView to your friends, colleagues, associates out there. And for those of you who would like to advertise on this amazing channel, please write to us at worldview.net@gmail.com. This is Solim Wang at WorldView. Goodbye.